My final guest is Clarkstown Town Justice Howard Gerber. Welcome, Judge Gerber.
Good afternoon, Supervisor.
So, Judge, I'm delighted to have you on the program. Really respect your volunteerism and your efforts. You've been a town justice for a number of years, but you've been very active within the community, longstanding law practice, and more importantly, also involved as a first responder within our community. And I'm really looking forward to speak to you about all of those aspects of your public service as a former chief over in the Valley Cottage Fire Department. But I'm delighted you're on the program, and maybe just for the benefit of our viewers who may not know you, maybe you could talk a little bit about your background, how long you've lived in Clarkstown, your education.
Sure. Well, my parents moved up here when I was about a year and a half old to Valley Cottage, and I attended NIAC schools right through high school, which is probably really where I got my start in government politics. Obviously, it's a family tradition. My dad was town supervisor when I was in high school, and there were always political discussions going on, political, legal, things like that. In fact, one of the political meetings that went on in my house when I was younger, there was a young attorney there who was very gung-ho about being an attorney, and he's kind of what convinced me to be an attorney, and that was Kenny Zabrowski Sr. And ended up going to law school. Went to Pace Law School in White Plains, and after that joined the Rockland County District Attorney's Office. Spent about 3 years there, and then I went to the Westchester County District Attorney's Office, spent another 8 years trying much more serious cases over there. There's a lot more crime. And unfortunately or fortunately, there's more crime over in Westchester than there is in Rockland. But I got a lot of experience there. About the time I finished college at SUNY Geneseo, I joined the Valley Cottage Fire Department. I can't imagine any red-blooded American little boy back in those days not wanting to ride the big red truck. But I was a bystander at a fire along the railroad tracks, and I saw that they were shorthanded, and that's pretty much what prompted me to join. Nothing has changed in those years. We're always shorthanded. But that's what got me interested in the fire department, and I've been doing that since 1979. I've been doing it over 30 years.
Wow.
Worked up the ranks. I did leave town for a little while when I was in the Westchester DA's office, but I belonged to the fire department over there, and then came back here and joined Valley Cottage again. And you went up through the ranks.
You had been chief in Valley Cottage, right?
So I just finished being chief 2 years ago. I'm back sort of again in the officer mode. I'm an assistant safety officer at this point, and using my expertise from my years as chief. We have a number of chiefs who've gone around a second time, and again, it comes down to a lot of people who move to the county don't realize that we have volunteer first responders, whether it's police, the auxiliary, or the ambulance or fire department, that these are all people in the community who work 2-3 other jobs and donate their time to help their neighbors. And we could always use more people to donate their time.
Roughly, how many calls would you say you've been on, and what's a typical year like in the Valley Cottage Fire Department?
Valley Cottage, fortunately, is not the busiest department in the county. Typically, we run a little over 200 calls a year. Most of those calls are false alarms. That's good that they're false alarms. It's bad that people have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to answer false alarms, but we'll have maybe 10 or 20 serious incidents during the year. When I started as chief, I kind of came in with a big one and I left with a big one. Really catastrophic. The last fire was really a catastrophic fire. I know you're familiar with what it's like to be in a burning building and helping your neighbors from that rescue that you were involved in. But the first rescue, the first call that I had really was somebody, icy day, had driven into the pond up on Mountain View Avenue, and needed 2 people needed to be extricated. Had a number of other fires, one in a dwelling that had been converted, which is not generally a problem in Clarkstown, and then the last fire was a house that literally exploded before we got there.
Wow.
So, but there aren't that many fires. Lately, in the last month or so, we had a number of potentially really bad fires that the training, Valley Cottage, and the neighboring departments that all assist each other, we were able to stop those fires relatively quickly.
Right. One of the things I'm excited about is we're actually looking at some opportunities here in the town with some town-owned property to try and create some additional volunteer housing to try and help, bolster the numbers. And we're looking at a piece of property that the town owns with a house that we've acquired, through really through foreclosure, and looking at the potential to try and host one or two firefighters or first responders. It's over in Congers, but it's close enough where I think it could be used for potentially for Valley Cottage as well. And I know it's one of the things that I would like to see us continue to pursue, because the amount of money that it's going to require to the taxpayer to go with a paid service is really excessive. And we've got tremendous volunteer services here with the volunteer firefighters, and that's really something that I would hate to see go away from Rockland County, and especially here on Clarkstown.
Well,
So,
when it comes down to it, most of the departments in Clarkstown certainly, but most of the departments in the county have the latest tools available to them. Taxpayers fund most of it, and fire trucks are very expensive, and everything that goes in it's very expensive. But if we had to pay for manpower just to put one truck on the road, probably $1 million a year. Right. And there's just no way that we can do that. And we're running short on manpower, and we really need people in their 20s and 30s and 40s. I just turned 60 and I'm still running into burning buildings. Right. Probably my doctor would advise against it. Yeah. But that's, we need younger people, men and women. There is a lot of training. We don't send you into a burning building without some ground rules and basic training. But we need the people who are young enough, fit enough to do the demanding work, and it's enjoyable. It's rewarding. Right. That's really what it comes down to, knowing that you've helped your neighbors.
I will tell you, I just have such a tremendous respect for all of our volunteer firefighters. Based on the experience that I had. I guess it was about 7 years ago now, driving past a house in Bardonia when it happened to be on fire, and I was the first person driving by. So myself and one of our recently retired officers, Officer Kevin Shannon, went in and we helped bring two people out from that building. But being that close, in such close proximity to a fully involved structure such as that, really, to say it's life-changing is an understatement. It's really, it was shocking to see how quickly the house became engulfed. There was oxygen in the house, and then just listening to the pop of the circuits like blowing up, and the oxygen eventually one of the canisters blowing up. It was just it was really astounding to be that close to it.
And after that incident, I believe I gave you an application to join, but you didn't take me up on that.
I will tell you, my wife told me two things the night that I got home after that.
You're lucky you didn't die, otherwise I would have killed you?
Yeah, she pretty much, words to that effect. She was like, very proud of you, myself and the kids are very proud of you, and if you ever do that again, I'll kill you. But that's why I have such respect for the volunteers, for what you guys do. But let's segue, Judge, over into your other avenue of public service here. You're town justice here in Clarkstown. And maybe you could speak a little bit about Justice Court and a little bit about your role as town judge and some of the assignments that you have.
Sure. Well, and it is kind of a segue because they're related. It's doing things for the community. I grew up in a household where my mother was a teacher at Valley Cottage Elementary School. My dad at one point ended up being town supervisor. So that kind of public service was always around. In fact, when they retired and moved to Florida, they got involved again.
You actually have a prop.
I do have a prop.
You brought along.
Which
I want you, before you leave, because your mom also became supervisor.
Yes, so
as well.
when they moved to Florida, after my father retired, the call just couldn't be resisted, and he got involved in the condo board, and that moved on, and ultimately got on the city council, became and in that location, Coconut Creek, Florida, the mayor is picked from among council members, and he became mayor a couple of times. And then when he died, they filled his spot on the council with my mother, who ended up serving the longest time of anyone in city history, and she'd been mayor multiple times. But one of the things that really excited me when I first became judge is that my mother used the same gavel that my father had used, and she passed that down to me, and so I actually have that gavel. And fortunately, I don't have to use it that much in court. Most people are well behaved when they come to court. Occasionally we have a problem. But that's actually the gavel that my dad used as supervisor in Clarkstown, as mayor in Coconut Creek, and then my mom used as mayor in Coconut Creek. So,
and it's great. It says Judge Howard Gerber, January 2007 when you became judge, and let's keep it in the family. That's great.
So I'm actually hoping to some extent that I'll be able to hand that down to one of my children. One of my daughters is currently a first-year law student at University of Virginia, and if the big money firms in New York City don't meet her liking, she's probably going to end up going the prosecutor route, which is what I did. In fact, this summer she'll be interning at the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Oh, great.
So I'm pretty proud of her. She's already done more trials than most attorneys. She was involved in the mock trial program here in the county that the Bar Association runs, and she's doing pretty well at school. But it all comes down to what was instilled in me growing up back in the 60s of, you know, what President Kennedy said of, you know, don't ask what your country can do for you, what can you do for your country? And I think that, you know, helping your neighbors is helping yourself. You know, God forbid someday you need help. If there's nobody there, you're in the same predicament. So, and that's often the way I look at it. It's like, you know, when I'm at an accident scene and extricating someone from a vehicle or whatever, what if there wasn't somebody here to do that? And fortunately, in Rockland County, we have a lot of volunteers, and every department's volunteer. But it's the same thing when it comes to government service. I don't think any of us are in it for the money. We all have to make a living, but I'll tell you that as being a town judge, I get to see a lot of everyday people. Most of the people that come into the court are not career criminals. A lot are our own children who have made mistakes. The drug epidemic is horrible. And so we spend a lot of time trying to straighten people out and get them going in the right direction again. Nothing is better than the feeling when somebody comes up to you, who, quite frankly, I see thousands of people in court, and I'm also a practicing attorney, and sometimes I forget where I know them from. Sometimes I've saved them from fires, sometimes they're in my court, whatever. But the best feeling in the world I had a couple of years ago when a young woman passed me at a party, said hello, I said hello. A few minutes later she came back, almost hysterical, to thank me for giving her the second chance that I gave her and forcing her to do what she needed to do. And she was telling me all about how she had turned her life around and what she was doing. And that's really, you know, the best part of the job. The worst part of the job is putting people in jail. We don't do it often. It does happen, but.
And you, just for the benefit of our viewers, I mean, we have about, you know, just a moment or two left, but Justice Court, our Justice Court in Clarkstown is one of the busier justice courts in the state. Do you have maybe put some characterization on the types of matters that will come before you, and you know, typically the numbers, you know, per year?
I actually happen to have that all right in front of me.
Great, go ahead.
But basically, the Justice Court handles every type of case that there is in the state of New York. We even cover some family court matters when family court's not in session. That happens very infrequently. But we handle all criminal matters. We handle civil matters up to $3,000. That includes regular civil court as well as small claims court, where people can represent themselves without an attorney. We do a lot of vehicle and traffic cases, speeding tickets, parking tickets, things of that nature. And the criminal cases run the gamut from your simple violation right up to murder. And on the murder end of it, we just handle preliminary matters and then would send it up to county court or to the grand jury. With regard to misdemeanors, where you can get a sentence of up to a year, we actually handle the whole thing. And you're entitled to a jury trial, so we do a number of jury trials a year for people who are entitled to that at the town level. The statistics, just this past year, I think are rather interesting. You know, small claims cases are actually down a little bit, about 220, but we have civil cases that also include landlord-tenant. Those are 339. It fluctuates. I've seen it go up and down exactly along the lines of how the economy is doing, both the small claims cases and the landlord-tenant cases. So the good news is that the number of DWIs we have are down slightly, but we still have 300 or 400 DWI cases a year. And then when it comes to the vehicle and traffic cases, we're about 16,000 tickets are written for various offenses. So we have a total cases, all the criminal cases, civil cases, of about 20,000 cases a year. There are 4 judges who are on a rotating basis. One of the differences between Clarkstown and the other towns in the county is at this point there's only one small sliver of Spring Valley that's part of that goes to the Village of Spring Valley Justice Court. As you know, a couple years ago, Upper Nyack abolished their court. So we handle all the cases in the entire town, whereas Ramapo, that actually has more land mass and has a bigger population, but they have a large number of villages, most of which have their own village courts. So we handle a lot of cases on a weekly basis. The judges rotate which type of cases they have. So on a given week, for instance, of any of the judges, Monday and Wednesdays are all day doing criminal cases. Tuesday would be all day doing traffic cases. Thursday would be civil and also state police traffic cases, which we handle separately. And then Friday we would start the jury trials.
Right.
And then we also hold court at night. Traffic court is every Thursday night. One of the judges is assigned to handle that. And Tuesday night is a small claims night.
And you're also on call, so you know, I've been over to the police department when judges have had to come in, you know, late in the evening for an arraignment or some situation, to be able to move somebody along or come early in the morning or come in on the weekend, because we can't be holding people in our holding cells for a lengthy period of time. We
happen to have a great facility with the Clarkstown Police Department. They have a number of holding cells, but we don't like to keep people there that we don't have the manpower, I guess, and supplies to keep them. Then it's not really designed to hold people for long periods of time. So they're entitled to a prompt arraignment, to have bail set if it's a kind of case where bail could be set or whatever else needs to be done. So we do get called all hours on the weekends. Warrants are picked up, people are picked up on warrants or crimes are committed and they need to see a judge. The jail won't take them until there's a commitment order signed or released and have bail posted.
And I know we're over time, but I would be remiss if I didn't also raise the issue about the issue with property maintenance violations and illegal housing and, you know, illegal conversion of housing, which that's somewhat of an epidemic in certain parts of the county. One of the things that we've done here, certainly over the last year or so, with bringing on a career criminal prosecutor, Leslie Kahn, in our town attorney's office, is really a new way of kind of combating that. And I want to thank you and the other judges for your efforts there. I mean, we're actually compelling through, you know, search warrants to be able to gather evidence in some of these cases. I know we've executed a couple of dozen of those warrants in the first 8 months since the program has really kind of been underway. And you know, we saw a dramatic rise in some of the cases that were going to court for illegal housing and for significant property maintenance violations. And that's really another aspect of what the judges are doing. I want to thank you for your efforts there.
Obviously, I can't talk about specific cases. We're not allowed to do that. But what I can say is, and I guess I didn't mention it earlier, I did spend some time working in the town attorney's office before I became judge. But including the time that I was in the town attorney's office and the about 10 years now that I've been on the bench, Since Leslie has become the deputy town attorney handling those cases, she's probably done more search warrants than I've seen in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
So yes, you've been increasing the caseload, and there's been a lot of those cases, and they work through the system the same as any of the other cases.
Right, and again, it's necessary. We have to. It has to become a deterrent. We need to enforce our zoning laws, and people. I don't care who moves into Clarkstown, but if you move into Clarkstown, obey the law, and that's across the board, and certainly with property maintenance, and certainly with illegal conversions, because that's where we put our first responders in jeopardy, and that's where everybody's home values can begin to suffer if people start to really illegally convert these houses and properties. Judge, I know we're over time by a good bit, but I wanted to keep it going because there's just so much information. And again, I want to thank you for your public service, not just as a judge, but also your service as former chief and your continued service in the firematic services. Thank you for being a great guest, and thank you for being such an involved judge and member of our community.
And thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity.
And we'll be right back.